Hey guys, welcome to the Ben Tracy podcast, where I interview thought leaders, parents, and educators about navigating life in the digital age and what we can all do to keep kids safe online. This podcast is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Let's get into it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Ben Tracy podcast. Today's guest is retired Sergeant Adam Kavanaugh. Sergeant Kavanaugh retired from the St. Louis County Police Department after 29 years in law enforcement. He was the commander of the Eastern District of Missouri Human Trafficking Task Force and the Deputy Commissioner of the Missouri Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Sergeant Kavanaugh is currently working with Crisis Aid International, a St. Louis nonprofit that works with trafficked and exploited youth. Thanks for joining me.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I guess maybe to start, can you kind of just summarize your nearly 30 years in law enforcement, particularly working on trafficking and exploited youth in online predator type cases?
Yes. So my career, of course, being old and all, it started about 30 years ago. I was very fortunate. I started out in the city of St. Louis as an officer, came out to St. Louis County, worked the road for a little while, but I got to get transferred into the narcotics unit, which also was a vice unit that I was part of. So I really got kind of my feet going in that field in the trafficking world, working in that vice unit as a detective. So as an undercover detective doing those operations. And, we're talking now 35 years ago. So things were done a lot differently than what we would look at trafficking today and how we would work with it today. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to have learned a lot in my career from, the way we used to do things all the way through to where they are today. But then I was fortunate. I came in, I was in unit for a little bit, went back out on the road for about a year when I got promoted, but I came back. So the last 21 years of my career was all spent working in the vice unit, working in trafficking, and then working with the exploitation of children for about the last 21 years of my career.
Wow. What percentage of the trafficking cases that you worked on in, say, the last 10 years started online?
Yeah, so online is the number one way that people are being recruited and trafficked is online. Even if you look at how advertisement's done, all the advertising for trafficking is done online. So that online component is very important. And I know we're going to talk more about it, but that's where it comes into what and when are we going to start talking to our youth and our kids. And I can share some statistical stuff from working with Crisis Aid that we do. Of what those ages look like. Because if you ask somebody that's not involved in the field, what they think, they'll give you one age, and then I give them the reality of what that looks like.
The age that it starts, or the age that the conversations just start, or both? I guess they're probably
right. Kind of both. The exploitation starting at younger and younger ages. So, for example, on that, if you look at just the exploitation part of it. Currently, we have a program that we're working with Crisis Aid. It's called CAP, so it's a Children's Anti-Exploitation Partnership. We partner with law enforcement and many other places, hospitals, Division of Family Services, a lot of different areas work with us. One of the average age group that's coming in of kids that are already online, video or taking pictures of themselves in nude and in sexual acts is about 6 years old.
Oh my gosh.
So when I talk to parents and we're talking about, when do you have the conversation? A lot of the times it used to be, well, we'll do it at like 13, right? That right there at those beginning of the teen years. But now parents have kind of adjusted a little bit. So they're saying like, well, maybe around 11 or 12. Well, that's when the reality comes in is, well, the conversations you're having at 11 and 12, of course, in an age appropriate way, need to be done before the technology ever hits their hand.
Yeah. And I think that's what so many, it's been so eye-opening to me. And the parents, honestly, in my work, speaking in schools all over the country for the last 6 years, that the parents is what really pisses me off the most. It's like, when you give your kid a phone at such a young age, or really anything with access to the internet or social media or even video games, like, what do you think is going to happen, right? When you hand your kid access to the world and the world to them.
Right. So the analogy that we like to use a lot is we'll talk to parents, we'll say, okay, so if you're going to teach your child how to cook, right? So you got your little child, 5, 6, 7 years old, wants to start learning how to cook. You don't go, there's the stove, start cooking. You go in there and say, okay, this is the dial, this turns the heat on. The top's going to get hot, so don't touch the top, right? We give all that direction. If we, when our kids learn how to drive, you don't just go up to them at 8 years old and hand them the keys and go, hey, go have fun. Right. What do? We take them out for drives. We make sure that they know what they're doing, give them the rules of the road, the safety part of driving and wearing your seatbelt, all those things that we do with those. Yet every day, parents hand their child the cell phone or the tablet and then walk away. So what kids tend to think in their head is well, mom, dad told me that, the stove's hot. Mom and dad warned me about the chainsaw and not to play with the chainsaw. But they handed me this device without saying anything, so it must be safe to use.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, it really is. Do you think parents don't know these dangers, or they're like willfully ignorant, or they don't understand the gravity of some of these different things, or why do they do that?
I think it's a combination of that and adding in the fast-paced lifestyle that people are living, right? It's easier to hand that device. I'll go to, so now I got grandkids, and I'll go to the play area with the grandkids in their little bouncy houses, and I'll look around at every parent that has their head buried into their phone, and I could like walk out with their kid and they'd never know.
Right.
So it's really, I think it's a combination of things. I think some parents, which they should, you see your 5-year-old, 6-year-old, you don't think my 5 or 6-year-old is going to make sexual videos and upload them online. I mean, their brain just isn't going to pick up on that. Unfortunately, when you're in the field with the things that you've done, the things that I've done, we know different. Right. And it really, so I think it's a combination of things. I think some of it is not uncommon for us to talk to, contact the parent about what's going on with their kiddo, and for the mom to say, oh, that happened to me when I was younger. I was hoping that would never happen to my kid, but then never had that conversation about how to keep themselves safe from those types of things.
Right. Yeah. No, there's like such a disconnect between, and it's surprising to me because the parents are like now starting to be parents who have grown up with this stuff, right? They got it in their teen years. They've dealt with some of this stuff where, like, my parents, they never had a smartphone, or, and so, but now so many more parents have. So I agree. Like, I see that disconnect. I do these parent presentations, and there'll be 100 parents in there, and I'll be standing up there for 10, 15 minutes, before they introduce me and start it. And you look around and no parents saying hi to the person that sits down next to them, or they say hi real quick and then they just go back to their phone. And it's like, why are we surprised that the kids would do the same exact thing?
I went out to dinner. I went out to dinner the other day with my wife or lunch, and I looked over and there's a mom and about an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old buried in the phone. Mom's just eating. And then mom would look up and go, hey, you should get off the phone. And then she's like, no, I'm trying to do da-da-da. Okay. And then just continues to let it go on. So to me, it is amazing. It's like, can we have a dinner? Can we have a lunch without having the devices constantly? And it's hard because devices are introduced at very young ages, because now all the schools, you got tablets. And that's a whole nother conversation. A lot of parents think, well, the school gave the tablet, so obviously they've put a bunch of software on there that protects the kid. Well, I'm here to tell you, there ain't nothing on those phones that are protecting them kids from predators online. Matter of fact, a lot of the kids that we meet and talk with, the means by which they uploaded the information, the nude images, all that type of stuff was done on their school laptop.
Really?
Yeah.
So just the younger kids, or is
all
across the board?
So my thing is, and what I'm trying to argue for, and I understand school's busy, things are expensive, things cost money. I get all that. But if we're going to protect our kids, that we can cut money somewhere else, is before the school hands a laptop or a tablet or whatever they're going to work on, there is, that I'm aware of, none of the schools around here that I'm aware of, do they actually sit down and have any class go, before we give you, kind of like we tell our parents, you can't rely on the parents, that is, before we give it to you, not just the scare tactic, but explain what it is, what can happen, what that looks like. They don't do that. And then the parent should come in and sit down for a class and have an honest conversation about, hey, we can only protect your child so much. Yes, we have software on there.
Right.
And more than likely your kid's going to figure out how to get around it.
There's always a workaround, right?
Always
On the device that the parents own or whether the school owns or what any parental control. I mean, there's a video for, I'll go in and do an hour-long parent presentation, which is, a good presentation, good information. But I also tell them, look, for everything I just told you for the last hour, there's a TikTok video out there telling your kid how to get around that parental, that parental control. And that's why the education piece of it, to directly to the kids is so
and not as a scare tactic,
right?
Not like the boogeyman's going to get you,
Right?
Because I've talked to many kids that have been abused, exploited online, and even when I catch the bad guy that was exploiting them, they still don't believe that that's the person they were talking to. No, that couldn't have been the person I was talking to. So if you try and do that, the boogeyman's out there. Kids do not correlate any different from when I meet you in person and we have a relationship and we talk and get to know each other is no different for them when they do it online and have never seen a person in person. They still have the same safety. Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's safe. This is a good person. I know it's this guy named Tommy or whatever, even though that Tommy person may have never have gotten online in video that they've seen, or they'll push the camera like sideways in a room, but never get on there physically to do it. But the kids still believe it's real. So the boogeyman is not going to work. It's never going to work. So if they're going to get up there,
Even when presented with the facts that this is who this person is.
Yes.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Well, and it's not just kids, it's senior citizens. It's a lot of different people. But yeah, the amount of, senior citizens that have come to me over the last 6 years of doing this, or someone, this happened to my grandmother. She was, met this person on Facebook and was, convinced to send them $50,000 or whatever it was. And even after she sent that money, my grandmother was still convinced that this man was real and just lived in the next town over and his car's broke or whatever,
Well, I watch and I use it for some of my presentations. There's a video that's a woman in her probably late 50s, early 60s, talking to a news reporter because she had gotten scammed. So she's talking about the scam. So for her, she had met somebody online. By the way, his name was Keanu Reeves. For 2 weeks, she thought she was in a relationship with Keanu Reeves. She said the only thing that changed her mind to think, oh, I'm trying to get scammed is because Keanu Reeves asked her for $50,000. And she thought, well, why would Keanu Reeves ask me for $50,000? So that's when she caught it. But for 2 weeks, she thought she was in a relationship with Keanu Reeves.
Right.
Just crazy. So, and that's what we always say is if our adults are tricked that easily, and then you add in the AI component to things and where that's getting ready to go, our kids, our 12-year-olds are going to be more savvy than our 50-year-old. And she was an accountant. So she college degree, she's an accountant, she's a professional woman. She fell into that trap. So how are our kids not going to fall into that trap?
Oh, totally.
And what parents ask me a lot of times. So what's two questions I generally get are three. What websites are safe? And I say none, because if I want to right now, I know how to get on Pinterest and find child sexual abuse material on Pinterest.
Right.
So I just throw that at them. I'm like, hey, who has Pinterest? Well, did you know you can find stuff on there? And they're like,
that's the one that most people would say that's the safest. Right. Name the safest app. It's most people who are on Pinterest.
Because it's everywhere. It's not nothing against Pinterest. It's not anything against any of these things. The exploitation is going to go on anywhere. Zoom. I mean, they do Zoom. They all get together on Zoom calls. All these pedophile people get on Zoom calls together and share their images and stuff live, so they don't have to download and upload it. Those types of things. So it's everywhere. So I tell them nowhere is safe. Period. You got to be careful everywhere you go. They want to know what's the number one thing that can be, what's the number one app that can be used to track my child? That's usually the next question. I say, well, there's a lot of good apps out there. Bark has some good stuff. There's plenty of good ones out there. However, I don't endorse any of them like this is the one,
right?
Because just like the other stuff, the kids are going to figure out ways around it. You put software on, just like the bad guys figure out, well, I'm on probation, so they're going to track this computer. Well, I'll just use this computer over here. I mean,
right.
They're going to figure out ways around it. So I said, here's how you protect your children. You have conversations with them about your morals as a family, what you believe in as a family, relationships and what those should like as a family. And then you have conversations about how to be safe, how you should be safe online, how bad people are out there that want to take advantage of people, whether it's financially or sexually or whatever it is, to everybody, not just you as kids. Having conversations with your kids, and not just today and not just tomorrow, but regularly.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be like beating them over the head with a stick. I tell them, it's just have a little conversation about it. Hey, throw scenarios out there. Hey, if somebody was on there asking you to send a picture of yourself in a bikini, what would you do?
Right.
Having those conversations is what's going to protect your kids, because if parents aren't involved, the child's going to get exploited online. It's just a matter of when.
Totally. I agree. I mean, that's when I talk to parents, that's the first thing I say. And to the kids too, like that needs to, you can go to your parents with anything, right? No matter how awkward or uncomfortable it is, because so many kids, if they haven't had that conversation, it takes a ton of courage to go to your parent, your teacher, your principal, right? And say that, I've made a mistake online, or I was sent something inappropriate. But yeah, I think that's so important. And I love what you said about the values. And that's what I tell parents is like, look, I'm not in the business of telling you what your family's values should be. But what I will tell you is when you give your kid a phone, they have access to the complete opposite of your family's values, right? Whatever those values are.
Right.
And, we're talking, some of the things we're going to talk about and are talking about are like, the worst of the worst scenarios, right? But let's just say best case scenario, you give your kid a smartphone and they're not exploited online. They don't fall victim to an online predator. They don't purchase a fentanyl online, right? Best case scenario, that kid is very confused during their formative years about right and wrong, good, evil. My parents say this thing, TikTok says this thing, right? I mean, I think that, if that's the best outcome, why are we giving these kids these devices and access to this stuff?
And absolutely, kind of bring it back to where we were at the beginning is especially when you're doing it with no guidance whatsoever. I mean, I know, because I see them, unfortunately, the videos that the kids are making and uploading to various service providers. We see a lot of Google where they upload on YouTube. So I see what they're doing. So I know where the computer and the cell phone is. It's in the bathroom. It's in their bedroom, down in the basement somewhere. It's always away from, where somebody might walk in on them while they're doing these things. So again, that's a conversation of, why would you allow your 8-year-old to be in his or her room by themselves with a device?
Agree.
I mean, to me, that makes no sense. Other people think, well, they have their right to privacy. I'm like, no. I tell parents all the time, like, no, I go, my kids, I knew my kids' passwords. I knew, because if me or my wife didn't know those, you didn't have it. So my kids had stuff. Of course, they're a little bit older. My son's 30 and my daughter will be 30 soon. So really that social media side of it was still but people were still exchanging images back then.
Right.
Pornography, that's another conversation. Maybe they don't get exploited. Maybe they don't do this, but their friend says, hey, do you know where babies come from? Because we're talking to a lot of kids that by 7 and 8 years old, they don't say it this way, but the way they describe it is they're addicted to pornography. That's 7 and 8 years old. And we're not just talking to boys. So it's not a boy. We talk to just as many girls that are addicted to pornography by 7, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. So now what are we doing? You don't want to talk about your morals and all these other things, whatever you feel for your family is right. Then pornography will teach them what it's expected of a woman, what's expected of a man, all those things in that type of relationship. So I always tell parents, who do you want it to learn it from? The predator online or pornography? Because if you're not having a conversation, they're going to learn it from one of the two people.
You're learning it one way or another at an age that none of us are comfortable with, right? Like in a perfect world, yes, we don't have these conversations until you're 12 years old, 13 years old, but we're not living in a perfect world, right? They're learning this stuff at a young age, and they're either going to learn it from the parents and guardians that have the values that you want them to have, or they're learning it from somebody else online, likely someone with different values and different intentions than you'd want.
And there's books out there. If your audience goes to ussafe.org, we have a list of books that we vet ourselves. So we have a team of people, advocates, our supervisors, me doing the law enforcement thing. We all read the books, make sure that the books aren't pushing any particular agenda of any kind. It's just good information for parents to have. So if they go to that ussafe.org, they'll find a list of books that we've looked through. They got them from different angles, some that are, Christian based, right? How do I look at it from a Christian point of view? Some that are non-denominational of anything, just a good book about information on they got one that's called How to Talk to My Child About Pornography. And it has a whole things of how to start those conversations and how to do it in an age appropriate way. So there are some resources parents can use. I mean, it's a hard conversation, but somebody's got to have it. So it's us or them. And I'd rather be me as a parent.
Right. No doubt. No doubt. What would you say to a kid who has been exposed to this stuff and doesn't know how to go to their parent, because I speak to a lot of students as well. And I know some students will watch this interview that you and I are doing. What would you say to a kid that who's sent an inappropriate picture that's been uploaded or had their nude photos passed around, or, has maybe started a conversation and then finds out that it's an online predator? Like, what is their next step?
Yeah. So my thing is I always tell kids all the time when I'm talking to them, most of these are children that have been exploited online, is your parents love you. They care about you, or it doesn't always have to be a parent. It's about what that family looks like, right? Whoever that family is for you, it could be a foster parent, could be biological mom and dad, could be an aunt, could be a grandma, that they love you. Yes, they're going to be disappointed, right? Because they love and care about you, want you to be safe. But even me, like as a parent, I always told my kids, I can fix just about everything. There's one thing I can't fix, and that's dead. So you can't sit there and let this thing get so far out of hand that you get so desperate that you decide the only option I have, because that's not the only option you have. There's a lot of, I know it's hard to see it through what's going on, but your parent, your guardian, whoever you're working with, the school, if it's a school counselor, whatever that looks like, they can fix anything except for dead. That's the only thing they can't fix.
Yeah. There's a young man from this town, Aurora, Missouri, fell victim to an online predator, acted like it was a girl, turned out to be one of these predators, blackmailed him for money, and he took his own life at 16 years old earlier, January 3rd of this year. His parents came up today as I'm running across the country. I've got this RV with 11 names of kids who died along my route. Fentanyl purchased online, the TikTok challenges, cyberbullying that has led to suicide, and the, sextortion scams that have led to suicide. And, so his parents came up, and when I started the run, they were there today. When I finished the run, they were there today. Doing a speaking engagement with them tomorrow here in St. Louis. What would you say to families like that have experienced that, let's say that family specifically is someone who's worked in law enforcement in the state of Missouri on these types of things? Do you have a message to a family like that?
That's a hard one. Not being in that position, it's hard to say. What I can say is using that tragedy to make more positive, to protect more kids. So my daughter was sexually abused as a child. So that's why I ended up here, doing what I do for the last 20 something years, pushing through all that, because I was like, now, I didn't do it the right way, meaning I put myself 18, 19 hours a day at work, doing all these things, ignoring the family, because I'm going to get everybody I can, get every bad guy I can. I'm going to keep going. I'd be chatting with people, because one of my jobs when I was doing it was to pretend I was a child, be online chatting and catching those guys that do that. It'd be Christmas Eve, 2:00 in the morning, and I'm chatting with somebody, because my head's going, well, if I'm online, I'm going to be online all the time, because I'm not going to be online from just 9 to 5. I got to
Right.
be,
The predators don't only work 8 hours a day.
right. So I can say I can feel that. I can feel the pain of, from my perspective, as far as the sexual abuse, things like that occur. And what I did with it, I just say, take that pain, turn it into a fire to get things going, get legislation changed if it needs to be changed, get schools to start protecting kids more when it comes to the digital information that's being handed to them. Make that your mission, but please don't take it to the degree of, you ignore the rest of your life and your family. They need you as well. So.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, so many people, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So many people in this space, at least I think the most effective ones have lived it in some capacity, right? Those are the stories that are the most important and resonate. 'Cause, great family, great parents, went to a good school. The parents both work in the school. And, so many other parents will think, well, that would never happen to me. And, for every parent, their last name's Bettler, for every family like the Bettlers, there's thousands of other families out there who aren't sharing those stories. So, the courage it takes for a family like that to share it so publicly, I think really speaks volumes.
And to kind of go on off of that would be, so let's say something happens. There's plenty of times where we get the tip later and the parent would already know, right? They already knew it happened, but their fear is my child's going to get in trouble because my child created this image, so I think they're going to be in trouble. If for some reason you think your local police don't understand what's going on, just about every state now has an Internet Crimes Against Children task force. Go online and find that. They are the people that work these cases day in, day out, 24 hours a day. They're the ones that, I was part of it. So we come out in the middle of the night and get and protect the kids and do all those things we do. Then call them or call NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They'll put you in contact with somebody that works this kind of thing. To just ignore it, one, isn't going to help any with your child, right? Because you're not going to know what resources you can use to help with that child. You're also not going to be able to protect other kids
because they just move on.
They just move on to the next
thing
one.
To somebody else's kid. Yeah. That's what I say all the time. It's like very few of these just have one victim.
Rarely. I mean, very rare. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen it.
Almost never, right? So, that's two things I hear a lot on the law enforcement side of this stuff is, A, I reached out to my local police department, nothing happened. B, the person who was the perpetrator is outside of the United States, and that was a dead end.
Right. And the issue comes, so there was a video out not too long ago where a dad had called, and I forget what police department it was, but it wasn't here locally, had called the police because he found out that his daughter had created these images and somebody adult online was trying to get the images. And the police that showed up at the door were like, well, your child could go to jail for creating images. It's like, and of course, all of us that do this are like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
And so there is this educational component. And I think some of your bigger areas that have your ICACs understand it and get it, but there's a lot more to this country than St. Louis County, St. Louis City, LA, the ones that get like all that money and all that attention to handle these kind of things.
Right.
So that educating of our law enforcement across the board could definitely be better, not only in exploitation, but in trafficking as well.
Yeah.
So we got to get that information out. But even if you don't have an ICAC ready available to you, if you call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they will get you to where you need to be with the right people that know the right answers. They're not just going to dump it off on somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. They always have the connections that they have.
Right.
So really is getting a hold of them and not just sitting on that information, because just because your child did it once doesn't mean they're not going to do it again.
Right.
Like it turned bad once and they'll in their head, what's the chances of it happening twice? So the next person they talk to, they're again going to believe that person is real.
Right.
Again.
Right. What would you say about the cases where the perpetrator's not in, is targeting it? Like this example in Aurora, Missouri, that person's not in the United States.
Well, they had recently, I think it was Michigan, one of those where they did extradite.
I think was a kid.
Yeah, they did bring that person back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of agencies that'll say, "Oh, there's nothing we can do. They're out." And it is limited for a lot of people. They don't have all those assets. FBI, Homeland Security, definitely does a lot in this realm and have those overseas connections. So just because they're overseas doesn't mean they can't do anything. Depends on where at overseas. I mean, I'm sure if they're in China, it's a little bit harder, it's going to be a little bit harder to do.
Right.
But to just write it off, because number one, I don't know how you know where they are, because I could be here in the United States and make it appear as though I'm in China or Guatemala or wherever I want to be.
Right.
So it takes that investigation, but that takes your federal agencies to kind of do those a lot of the times, unless you have an ICAT, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. A local police department's not going to really have those connections to do those kind of things. The other thing is okay, so let's take out the criminally, what can we do to this person? To me, that's secondary to what are you going to do for your child and their mental well-being.
Sure.
That's far more important. The bad guy going to jail is important because he's gonna abuse kids. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But the number one is what can be done for my child, which fortunately here in the St. Louis area, so Christ Aid International, which I do side stuff for, has a program that specifically deals with and works with children that have been exploited online. Or even if they haven't been exploited yet, but let's say two teenagers, exchanging photographs of each other.
Yep.
So we have a program, they meet with our advocates. The advocates talk to them about, just stuff in general, things and how to be safer and, and really spending time with kids.
Yeah.
We have two offices in St. Louis County. We have one in Jefferson County. We have one up in St. Anne. They're all in the police departments. St. Charles County, we have one out there. We have St. Louis City that works with St. Louis County. And then we also have an office in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have 3 offices up in Grand Rapids, Michigan area. And then we just opened up an office in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So anybody in those areas, if you're having any issues, get a hold of you or whatever, you can get a hold of me and we'll get that taken care of.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's the most important thing is we got to make sure the child's doing okay. And just the child telling mom and dad, I'm okay, doesn't mean they're okay. What are you going to do when that person carries out their threat and then sends those images to a bunch of their people on whatever, Instagram or whatever they're using? How well have you prepared your child to handle the inevitability if it did come out?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really tough things with these kids is they feel so much anxiety with, whether it's the inappropriate pictures or the cyberbullying or what have you, that it's going to reemerge, right? Where it's like, if you say you drink and drive and you get in an accident, that's horrible, but it's over. Like, you hopefully learned your lesson, but you're not going to pay for that same crime twice, right? Whereas if you make a mistake online, so many of these kids tell me, well, I'm just so anxious that I know somebody still has that nude photo, or I was bullied online and I'm just waiting for that fake account to reemerge. And I think that contributes to a lot of the anxiety that these kids are feeling.
Oh, they've done there's some studies out there that have been done about victims of child sexual abuse material and that very thing on how, it never goes away, because when is it going to come up? When, especially in the sex trafficking, when they're children and they're sex trafficking children, when am I going to run into one of the people that paid for sex with me? I'm going to be walking, am I going to bump into them? And they spend a lifetime of that anxiety. So really working with them, getting all that out and telling them, okay, there's things we can and can't control in life. And this is how we deal with the anxiety. Because if you don't, you're going to see the suicide attempts and the self-harm and all that stuff that comes, the drinking and the drug problems they're going to have, these online behaviors and these online abuses, the emotional state that the children go through are exactly the same as kids that have been physically, sexually abused. But then you add in, if it's a child that's been sexually abused with no images and a child that's been sexually abused with images, this child spends a whole life, and this one is going to be afraid that they might run into their perpetrator at some point. Hopefully you can get them out where it's safe. Whereas this person wonders every day who's looking at their pictures.
Who's seen it?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's always wonderful subject to talk about. You do it right after dinner is always a good time to have this.
Well, that's why we're doing this, because not enough of these conversations are happening, especially on camera.
And it needs to be, I have some faith, right? So on the positive side of things, like, so my daughter-in-law, she's, 30 years old, and her group of pictures of group of people that she talks with and stuff are actually starting to go back to where, instead of handing all these devices, like she said, when my children get older, at a point they're going to have a phone. It's going to happen,
right? But
it's going to be this kind of phone. It's going to be a flip phone with no camera, with, not internet access. They can text mom and dad. They can call mom and dad, and there's still dangers, right? Because you can still, somebody can randomly, people randomly send texts out all the time with nude pictures.
Sure.
So it could happen, but it lessens it. So I think that generation now, because they grew up with it and so on, I'm starting to see, and it's hopeful when I listen to them talk about how other friend groups and that come around and they come and hang out, talk about those types of things and what they're going to do to try and protect their children going forward.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I tell parents. I'm like, look, if you're a parent and you've got a kindergartner and you've got an 8th grader, well, okay, you also, everybody gave their 8th graders the phones when they were in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, whatever. Like, that ship has sailed, but you can parent, and you probably should parent that second child a whole lot differently, because we now know more about this stuff, A, and the dangers, and B, you have what you just mentioned. There are more options that are low tech, slow tech, as opposed to an iPhone, right? It's Bark or Gab or TrueMe or, a company like that, or Flip Phone, or the watches or whatever. And again, none of them are perfect. They're still the potential for danger, but certainly significantly less. And so that's why I tell parents, like, don't be too hard on yourselves for not knowing what you didn't know. But now in 2024, not knowing that this stuff is potentially harmful for children is like it's not a very good excuse.
And the other thing too is with parents. So you have your extremes, right? You have your parents that at 3 years old, the kids are, online all the time. And then you got the parents say, my kids are never having it until they're 18.
Right.
So I tell parents, you make a judgment call, whatever your judgment as a parent, I will not question. However, keep this in mind. Just if you think by not ever giving a device till they're 18, so you can avoid having the conversations, is going to backfire on you. You still have, even if you don't give them the device, you should still be having the conversations about the device, about what you're doing. If, when it comes time that that you have one, it's not that I don't trust you.
Right.
When you have those, you still have to have those, because what's going to happen is you're going to have an old phone laying around the house. Their friend is going to have an old phone
right next to them's on all this stuff,
and is going to hand them the phone. And then they're going to have one. They're going to jump on Wi-Fi at McDonald's. They're going to jump Wi-Fi at Breadco. They're going to, so you, just by not giving a device doesn't mean you don't have the conversation. You have to have the same conversations with or without the devices, because their access to the devices is going to happen.
Right.
Number one, you can't get away from it. That's why during COVID, the sexual exploitation of children just skyrocketed off the charts. Because why? One is because the bad guys were at home unsupervised, so they were able to have more time to exploit people. You had kids home from school, bored, not knowing what to do, so they were online more than they ever been. And then you had those kids, the ones that the parents said, I'm not giving them a laptop, I'm not giving them a cell phone. And then guess who handed them a laptop?
Their school.
Their school gave them the tablet. They gave them that laptop. Now they've never had any conversations with their child, because I'm just not going to give them any devices. Now they've got one. And things just, and it just, and unfortunately, we were hoping that curve would become a curve and it would drop back down. But the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which has a great website resources too, if you look, it started going up and up and up, and it didn't change. It hasn't
gone back down.
It has not gone back down since.
Is it plateaued, or is it still
It's still doing it'll do its little dips, and it keeps rising. If you look at, and it's online, and I forget what it's called, but there is a chart that starts from, before any technology, and then as technology came in, and if you look at with each advent of, cell phones coming out, and then, social media, if you look, the exploitation curve follows it and goes up and up and up as each technology. And now we got to deal with Now we got to deal with AI.
Trend, right?
Now we got to deal with AI,
Right.
which that's off the chains. What's going on in AI, safety-wise? So years ago, you had those scams, right? Hey, this is Officer so-and-so. Your kid's in jail in Mexico or wherever they might be at. You need to send $5,000 to bond them out of jail. And people fell for it and did it. So parents and everybody, I get it. You're proud of your children, but please stop putting them all over online, because they're going to get inundated. Their pictures are going to be stolen. We already had bad guys all the time that would, of course, they're lying to me about who they are when I'm, do my thing. And what they would do is look for open Facebooks or imaging websites, and they would go on there, pull those, and that would become them and their family.
Sure.
Because people leave things open. Well, in the AI world, what they're doing now is they're taking the voice. So now they're taking that voice. They only need like 5 to 7 seconds. And then, so I did it with a free version just to test it out, which means it's not good if it's a free version. And I gave it 5 seconds, 7 seconds of my voice. And then I typed out a paragraph of what I wanted me to say. And then I said, okay, now say that in my voice. And it came back not perfect because it's a free version.
Right.
Because it had a little bit of hesitation, but it was in my voice.
Right.
And so what they're doing now is, and that's what we tell parents, well, we tell everybody, really with your family, you should have safe words to know if it's truly them. Because now what you hear is your son calling you because they got offline, said, hey, mom, this is, hey, mom, it's Tommy. I'm in jail. You got to get me out. And it's their voice.
Right.
So you've got to have those words like, oh, okay, and not a yes or no, because then they got a 50-50 chance to share right. What's your favorite color? And then make it sound, and then make the answer be eggs, not even a color, something along those lines, because AI has gotten that way. And then with the child sexual abuse images, when I first started out 21 years ago, what these predators would do is they would take naked bodies of kids, let's say of a 13, what looks like a 13-year-old girl's body, and then the little 13-year-old girl who lived next door, they would cut and paste her face onto these naked bodies, and you could tell it was cut and paste. Well, now with AI, it looks like that's there's no seams and cut marks.
Right, they just take that kid's face off their parents' Facebook page, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they can do it off their schools. I mean, we've dealt with schools who they're going to the school's public-facing Facebook or Instagram page and then creating this, child sexual abuse material using AI from the school's social media, right? And, kids recording their teacher and voice cloning their teacher and uploading that to social media. Kids who have called out us, they'll record, their mom will be driving to school in the morning. They'll record their mom just talking about whatever, and then will call themselves out of the school using the mom's videos, right? So that's another thing we've talked about with schools is like, if somebody calls her, you said exactly.
Yeah. And then how long is it before, if it isn't already happening, is that our predators aren't doing the same thing. So unfortunately you get some of these, young people that fall in love with that 30, 40-year-old guy, and they're 12, 13, 14 years old. So now they clone mom's voice and says, hey, I'm going to have her uncle come by and pick her up and blah, blah, blah. They're going to drive to school. And mom called and said it was okay, and then leave with the child. So yeah, I mean, schools are going to have to come up with safe words as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff is really
AI is going to be. And so what they're working on, and it's probably not too far off. When they say new technology is going to come out, usually it's within 3 to 6 months or what it is. So one of the technologies with AI is I'm on my laptop and my camera on, and I'm talking to you, and you're on your laptop talking to me, but I can make you see and hear what I want you to see and hear. So voice-wise. So I can go online, steal, because mom put this long video of her 14, 15-year-old online, and so I steal his identity. That I pumped into my computer. And then when I'm talking to you, even though I'm talking, you'll hear what sounds like a 15-year-old person's voice. And the picture you see on the other end that's moving, the head's moving and talking, will be the 15-year-old that I got offline. So now how are kids going to know? Now it's going to be, because now it's like, you create a video. Oh, here's a video of me, but not doing that live interaction. The live interaction is not far down the road. And then what do you do?
What do you do?
Have conversations with your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it always comes back to. I always tell parents, we can do all this technology. If you're going to wait for technology to fix your parenting problems, it's never going to happen. I mean, I hate to say it that way. Some parents get a little mad at me when I say it that way, but it's true. it's not their job. Now, there's things 100%. I can go on a million tangents about what technology needs to do and what's available that they could be doing, but they won't. All about money. But you can't wait for them to take care of your child.
Right.
You've got to have those conversations. Like, it always comes back to the same thing. Your morals, what you want your family to look like, what you think is right and wrong, whatever that is. I don't care if you're left, right, center, whatever you are. But let's say you're on the far left end of things and you're teaching your children this, and you got somebody on the far right feeding them all, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. It's what you want what you think you believe is good for your child to do. So don't wait for technology to do it, because okay, how are they keeping kids off of pornography? So Google made a big splash about 8 months ago about how they are protecting millions of kids from seeing pornography, because when you type in their search engine, right, something might come up, pornography, right? So they're blurring all this out now. So if it's a nude image of somebody, it blurs out all the images. I said, okay. So I got on there to look at it, and yep, it blurs it. And then right underneath where you type, it says unblur. Like not even like when they first did it, you had to go through like 3 steps. You had to click on this and then click on this and then click on blur. Not that a kid couldn't have figured that out either.
Right.
But now I guess that was too much. So now they literally have a button that says unblur, and you just click unblur. And now you can see it now. It will stop children from accidentally coming across those images.
Sure.
For sure. It will do that. Where they make it sound like they protect all these. Well, no, because most of the kids we come in contact with are already looking for it.
Right.
So you want to stop them. I have an easy way to do it. It'll never be done, I don't believe, in my lifetime anyway, is if I create a crypto account, I've got to get on. I've got to take a live picture of myself. I got to upload a live photograph or my ID and all that stuff. Compares, does it, and I can create a crypto account. Okay. So technology's there. Well, for pornography, all I got to do is click I'm 18.
Right.
They could do, the technology is there. They could do it.
They did it for COVID.
Yeah.
Right. They did.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I remember like doing the face scanning thing. They do it for everything. Right.
Yeah.
But not
pornography though. And I'm not saying I'm not one of these people that's on a bandwagon that hates pornography. What you do as an adult, I don't care, but they won't do that because your average person, I'll just say male, because males probably are the consumers more of pornography than anybody. But are you really, if you're looking at pornography, going to upload your ID and your face? Because everybody remembers years ago when the one website got hacked and they started putting out all the guys that were meeting up with Madison.
Yeah.
So they're like, so if they won't do that and they can't get on the site without doing it, advertising drops. Right. So it's simple. That's an easy fix right there. Facial recognition, coming in, ID, picture, and then every time you get on, you scan your face to get onto your account to look at the pornography. It won't solve everything. So you're going to have bad guys that are going to access it and then come and send it to kids. But it keeps kids from going on to pornography sites, for sure.
Is that a viable option for social media? Keeping kids off social media apps too?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But what do? You look at a lot of the gaming stuff, and that these kids are getting on and that parents think are safe, like all these gaming sites are safe. Most of the stuff we see starts on a gaming site and then moves to Snapchat or whatever that's going to be private, so they can be encrypted, but it'll start on the gaming site. Most of them are like 12 years old. You can start your own account at 12 years old. Yeah. I don't know anything else you can start at 12 years old. You're not, but, and Roblox is a big one.
Yep.
And they're getting ready to come out with the Roblox movie. So Lord knows what's going to happen when kids start going to see the Roblox movie.
Right.
That's about to generate more people to go to the Roblox website. Yeah. And I was watching a video the other day where a lady, and I didn't know this, and this was just a month or so ago, that there's actually, you can go to Roblox and there's sexual fantasy parts to Roblox as well, if you look for it. So
truly, it's everywhere.
It's great. Yeah. You just, again, conversation.
Well, and even if the age is 12, 13, like the kids all lie, right? The thing I do,
nothing verifies the age.
Right. I go in, I do these talks, and a lot of schools would do like 3 to 5, 6 to 8, high school, and then parents. It's usually kind of that run a show. But 3 to 5, I go, how many of you guys are on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram? They all rate, 70% of them, even in that age, raise their hand for one of those 3 apps.
Yeah.
And then I go, how many of you are 13 years old or older? Of course, no hands go up. And I go, somebody tell me what the minimum age to create an app, create an account on one of these apps is. And somebody inevitably knows that it's 13. So I just asked them, like, how did that happen? I'm like, you lied. That's because that's the only way it would allow you to create that account is saying that you're 13, not 9, and it's just, it is.
And here's a good question you could do to your parents. How many of you created an account for your child on one of these apps?
Right.
And then go, well, you gotta be 13 to be in that app. So did you lie for your child and say they were 13?
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't quite put it that way. I mean, I'm supposed to everybody to back, but but really is asking, because we run into parents all the time. Like, so they got YouTube and YouTube Kids. We get a lot of kids that are on YouTube that are uploading stuff. It's like, well, I knew they had a YouTube account because at 8, 9 years old, nobody says they want to be policemen, firemen, doctors anymore. They would be influencers. That's what I'm going to be, an influencer when I get older. I'm going to be, and I've read those articles. I read one article about a parent who, her daughter had this account, and she noticed that it was all these men that were old, middle-aged men. Like, what are you doing looking at this, this content? Well, we know what they were looking at it.
Yep.
And why. And not that she was nude or anything like that, but it was just, it doesn't matter. That's kind of where it all starts. And so she said, I started blocking some of them because of the comments they were making. Well, you got to get so many likes and so many whatevers to be an influencer. So if you start narrowing down the people you're going to allow in, so she goes, so I just had a conversation with my daughter on how not to interact with them, and then opened it back up again. And it's like, so a lot of the parents are creating accounts for their kids, even if the website says 12-year-old limit, 13-year-old limit. I mean, how many kids had Facebook that their parents actually created it for them? Because my thing is what standard are you setting for your child then if you're creating it for them, right? You're telling them that rule doesn't apply. So when they decide to go to pornography sites and well, mom said I was 13 when I was 8.
Right.
Why not? Or dad, whoever is in the situation. So yeah, so I'd ask that one, be like, oh, so it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've taken a very direct approach with the parents, it's like, I don't care if they don't like me when it's over. I think they'll at least respect me. Hey, I've done this for 6 years. I've traveled all over. I lived it myself, and, not the sexual abuse material, but a mistake online as a teenager, which is actually like a very freeing thing. I realize it's like, 2 reasons. Well, the schools pay me in advance before I go there, so I don't give a shit. And I already got fired, so I really don't give a shit. I'm like, I get fired from a job for like teenage social media posts, and they like call me all the worst names, is actually like a freeing thing, because they're like, well, they've already said the worst things they can say, right?
Right.
What is some parent who's upset? What does that matter?
Right.
So,
and if they're upset, generally, it's going to be because they got called out on something.
Yeah.
And it's, me, I had to be more diplomatic because I had bosses. So, how you had to be careful what you say sometimes. But I'm not known for being shy about saying things. But yeah, I mean, if the parents are not going to parent, the likelihood of that child making it through without any kind of exploitation is probably pretty low. You've got to be involved. Now, like I said, I was working 18, 19 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. I was, and then on my days I wasn't working, I was on the phone talking about work, but my wife was very involved in everything they did.
Yeah.
She knew who were online. She'd look at online friends and she'd see one that wasn't, when they were teenagers, that wasn't, revealing clothing or something like that. And she can either take that picture offline and you can remain friends online with her, or you're going to have to tell her you're going to have to unfriend her from, whatever social media, because you have to have those standards. And if it says 13, then when they ask you, that's a good out. Well, I'd like it. Well, my son's so, well, then either parents don't know about it or they're not following the rules. And we, in our family, we follow rules. So talk to me when you're 13. Doesn't mean you're going to give it to them when they're 13, but at least it puts it off from 8 years old to 13, saying, hey, you can't. It's against the rules to do that.
Right.
Because if you're allowed to break this rule, what's the difference about breaking that rule or another rule?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know you said you work too much and, we're away from the family, but I also saw that your daughter, that, doing some preparation for this interview, I found a TV segment where your daughter had submitted you as the hero of the day or whatever it was. So she's clearly proud of all the wonderful things you've done. And
Well, funny story is, so right after I retired, we were taking the whole family. We're gonna all grandkids and everybody. We're gonna go down to Destin and get a house and just kind of chill out for a week or so. And I went out with my same daughter. We go out to eat dinner that night. We're just sitting there and we're eating. And she goes, "Hey, Dad, I just thought about something." I go, "What's that?" She goes, "This will be the first vacation you won't be on your phone the whole time." It's like, man, I hate when they do that shit.
but I mean, I get it too, right? Like, no, I'm doing something good right now. We're making a video.
My parents always said that. We understood that, because I talked to my son, I talked to my daughter, because now they're having kids. I got the grandkids. I said, and I tell them, I said, "Hey, look, don't do what I did. Your family's just as important as everybody else's family. And, I didn't do these things. I did too much of that. And I don't want you as a father, do it, because we always want our kids to do better. And we did, right?" My son would always tell me, he'd say, "Oh no, we knew you were protecting kids." I go, "Don't matter. If you're ignoring your own family and things go sideways in your own family because you're protecting other families, it's not going to work."
Yeah.
So
That's a great point. It's for all of us in this space, myself included. I don't have kids, but nieces and nephews. It's like,
yeah,
if somebody comes to me with an issue, I'll be there at midnight having a conversation, how to report it. But it's like, you ask yourself, well, do I check in and have this, when my nephew who's 7 years old FaceTimes me, like, do I have that conversation enough?
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a good reminder for a lot of people in this space.
It's hard. It's hard to turn that off. I mean, I retired, 3 years ago now. So I've been retired for 3 years. Well, I'm still doing it, not as much, not even close to it. Other people go, "You still work?" I go, "Yeah, not compared to what I was doing, 20 hours a week or so. Yeah, no, it's not working, but that'll go away too." But it's hard to walk away from this when you know that, everything we do, and people that work in this area, everything you do has a potential to really touch another family in a way that's going to be life changing for the kiddo and the family. The other thing is, a lot of times these kids come in, if there's multiple kids in a family, if one kid is doing it online, you can bet the other kids have or are going to. Right. So that's another thing we do at Christ's Aid, is we work with the whole family and even talk to the other kids, not like just that child. We talk to the other kiddos too, because there's this group online. I won't say who they are because what they do is atrocious. But what they do is they have kids that chat online with somebody they didn't know, but it's actually this group.
Yep.
And then they confront the kid and scare the crap out of the kid, like have them show up somewhere, and which I think is horrible. You should never do that to a child. But what I found interesting was watching it was they did it to the one child. And then like a year later, so that child, they had a sister. That sister was a little bit younger, knew what happened, knew their sister was talking to this crew, knew that she got caught by mom and dad, all that stuff. Like a year later, they did a setup on the other daughter, and she fell for the same thing. So even though that happened in that family, and that was the whole thing, is like, why would you do that? Your sister did the same thing. It's not going to correlate. These kids are not going to correlate that their sister was talking to somebody that turned out to be either the police or whoever, or bad guy or whatever, because the person they talking to is who they say they are.
Right.
And you're not going to change your mind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just these kids are just growing up in such a different time, which I think is important to acknowledge from the parent side of it too. Is like, look, yes, I may not know every feature of TikTok as your parent or as your guidance counselor. I don't know everything about Snapchat, but I know how to get you the help that you need if you find yourself in a dangerous, uncomfortable type situation online. Because so many parents, they know, look, my parents don't understand this stuff, but that in and of itself is not reason not to go to them.
Yeah. And I can tell you, a lot of the kids that went to their parents right away when things happened were, every one of those parents that I can think of in my mind were parents that talked to their kid and told them, we all make mistakes. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to lie to you and say you're not going to get punished. You'll get punished. I mean, it's just, I'm being real with you. I want you to be real with me, but you need to come and tell me if anything like this happens. And most of the time, or at least all the times I can remember, the kids that came to the parents and the parents came to the police to report it were parents that had those conversations with their child before that exploitation happened.
Yeah.
So again, it's back to parent, parent, or guardian, or whatever. Like I said, whatever that family looks like. It might be foster mom and dad. It might be whoever that is. But conversations will thwart off more of this than anything else, or at least the continuation of. If you're making a mistake and you send one picture and they start sextorting you for the rest, for more and more and more, or asking for money, the best way to stop, because it's never going to stop.
Yep.
And that's what we tell the kids. You can pay them until the lights go out. They're still going to come back and ask for more money. $50 is going to be, okay, you can't afford 50, send me 10. Okay, I got $10, so I have my allowance.
Right.
So I pay him $10. But then it's going to be, oh, wait a minute, I want 10 more. I want 10 more. I want
Never
ends. And it never ends. And I think that's where the desperation comes in. So if after that first mistake, they're comfortable with, okay, I know I'm going to get in trouble, but I got to do something about this, those kids tend to flourish a little bit better than if it's kids that have a family that converse. And I'm not saying they're easy. I've had really uncomfortable conversations with my kids. My son was very smart in computers. And he knew I had everything blocked. And I see this all the time with IT families and stuff like that. Everything blocked. When I wasn't at home, my kids couldn't get online, couldn't do their homework, couldn't do nothing. Me and the wife weren't at home. The computer was in the living room and it faced out towards, like if I'm looking at TV, the computer screen was right next to it. So I can look back. I knew exactly what you're doing online.
Right.
So I came home one day with me and my wife went out. My son goes, hey, Dad, I know you told me not to get online when you're not home, but I wanted to show you something. He's on the computer because I can get on it whenever I want. I don't do it because I respect and I follow. I think it was all BS. He was probably getting on it, but at least he wanted to say that make you feel. And it's funny because he was in a computer, so he was like, "Oh, and I also learned this." So he had taken his PlayStation or whatever he was using at the time controller, hid a thumb drive into it, ran out of cord, put a Linux operating system on it. He goes, now, if I plug this into the computer and I type on it, you can use all your tools. You're never going to find nothing because it's on this thing over here. Yeah. So but where he learned YouTube,
Right.
getting on YouTube, he's a very big Linux person back in the day.
Yeah.
So, but they learned it all on YouTube. But we had those conversations. I'm not dumb enough to think he probably didn't get on there at times. I didn't know what was going on. He was a teenage boy, who knows? But we had the conversation. So I know if anything was to happen, and he always said, oh yeah, if something would have, I would have, come up front. Now it's funny because he's very strict with his daughter, but but the interesting thing is even kids. So his child, who's 4 now, she was allowed 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes for any electronics. That meant TV, that meant screen, anything. Couldn't have more than 30 minutes a day. By 2 years old, and only having that amount of time, she wanted to use my wife's phone. My grandkids are Ukrainian and an American, so they speak Russian and they speak English. They always have, and she likes to hear things in Russian as opposed to English. So she took my wife's phone at 2 years old, changed the language to Russian, and was able to watch the little show that she wanted to watch at 2 with only 30 minutes a day. So just think how advanced kids are
When it's 4 and 5.
when you hand it to them and it's all day long babysitter.
Wow. Yeah. No, this has all been great advice. I mean, everything you've said for the last hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah, I know that they all clean, but they go quickly. No, most of them, I asked him when we finished. I'm like, how long was that? It could have been half an hour. It could have been 2 hours. I'm not sure. So no, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you doing this. Is there anything else you want to share about your work or Crisis International or anything else parents or schools should know before we wrap this up?
Yeah, anything here locally, meaning, Jefferson County, St. Charles, St. Louis, and if you're from up in the Grand Rapids area or Colorado Springs, if you have any questions, any problems or issues, please just go to ussafe.org and it will have our contact information in there. It also has the NetSmarts in there. It has the National Center website. It has the books that we talked about earlier. So it has a lot of resources on it. But if you would, even if your child hasn't sent images and all that, but maybe they're texting back and forth, maybe something a little inappropriate. We have advocates that are highly trained, very good people that can sit down and kind of help work through that, talk about boundaries and those types of things. So if you're in this area, Grand Rapids or Colorado, by all means, reach out to us and we have somebody available to help. And it costs absolutely nothing it's all free services.
Amazing. And you mentioned ICAC
Yeah.
and NCMEC and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is great resources.
Yep. And St. Charles County is the headquarters for the Internet Crimes Against Children for the state of Missouri. So it's right here locally as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks, man. Hey.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks again to Bark Technologies for sponsoring this podcast. We'll see you all on the next episode.